My name is Nancy Hopkins, and I'm a lifelong history student and a U.S. Army veteran. I decided to take another look at the U.S. Constitution and ask, how did it come to be written? Who wrote it? And what does it say? Every military person and seemingly every U.S. government official, from the state, maybe local probably too, to the federal governments, take an oath of office that includes these words. I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Well, to get the answers, we need to take a history trip that for us begins in 1763, at the end of the war between France and Britain for dominance in North America. While the British territories in North America evolved into 13 separate entities called colonies, having their own governments, the British king controlled those governments. When the British won their war against France and certain Native American communities, the king ordered a standing army be created and the colonies were to be taxed to pay for it. This resulted in the colonists beginning to unite under the slogan, "No taxation without representation." With the war won, the Constitutional Convention was held to create a new form of government. There would be no king, no autocrat, or any elite power group of politicians holding control over the nation. The supreme power in the new nation would be the people, the citizens of the nation. The 1787 group of men highly engaged in conducting the war for independence, called the American Founding Fathers, came together and created the Constitution of the United States to unite the 13 states under a federal government. The first words of the preamble of the Constitution are, "We, the people of the United States." As we look at the Constitution, keep in mind their goal is to ensure the supreme power of the government resides in the people, not the government at either state or federal levels. Now, interestingly enough, in 1988, the U.S. Congress formally acknowledged the influence of the Native American Iroquois Confederacy on the U.S. Constitution. The Iroquois Constitution, also known as the Great Law of Peace, is a great oral narrative that documents the formation of a League of 6 nations. Together, these 6 nations formed a multi-state government while maintaining their own individual government. And just as a side, that nation is still in existence. As we look at the Constitution, keep in mind the goal is to ensure the supreme power of the government resides in the people, not the government at either the state or federal levels. Articles 1, 2, and 3 establish 3 branches of federal government. The legislative branch creates laws and regulations. The executive branch has the responsibility of implementing those laws created by the legislative branch. The third branch is that of the judiciary, comprised of the Supreme Court and lower federal courts. The judiciary branch is required to make judgments in accordance with the U.S. Constitution. With Articles 1 through 3 setting up the 3 branches of the federal government, Article 4 focuses on the responsibility of each state to not discriminate against citizens of other states. States must give people from other states the same fundamental rights it gives its own citizens. It also stipulates criminals must not find safe haven by simply running to another state. The subject of creating new states and territories is also addressed. And Article 4 is where Congress is empowered to protect the states from foreign invasions and assisting those states in putting down internal violent uprisings. Article 5 establishes the stringent requirements of the amendment process to make changes to the Constitution. This process was actually used to create the Bill of Rights, added as amendments before the final 2 states ratified the Constitution in 1790. Article 6 is a complex issue that charges The judiciary branch was sorting out the conflicts between the federal laws and state laws. Article 6 is a constitutional article that is the basis for many Supreme Court decisions. But the critical inclusion in Article 6 is it demands that both federal and state officials, including legislators and judges, to obey the U.S. Constitution, with state officials having a duty to obey their own state constitutions and laws as well. The original Constitution ratification process is laid out in Article 7. Each state was required to ratify the Constitution. The signing of the Constitution at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia was September 17, 1787. The last state to ratify it came after 1790, with the addition of the Bill of Rights amendments. However, with 9 states ratifying it, the official date of the Constitution ratification is June 21, 1788. So what is the Bill of Rights? Yes, they are amendments to the Constitution, and therefore the law of the land. Some thought the limitations on the power of the federal government stipulated by the original Constitution guaranteed human rights. Others wanted those rights spelled out. The first Congress of the United States agreed with James Madison, leading the campaign for rights of the people to be spelled out as amendments. The proposed 12 additions to the Constitution were sent by Congress to the states. By December 15, 1791, 3/4 of the states had ratified 10 of these, now known as the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment confirms freedom of speech and of the press, freedom of assembly and the right to petition the government, freedom of religion. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms that continually comes into question. The actual text says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. To me, this is not so much a right as an obligation. The men who created the Constitution and its amendments had succeeded in gaining their independence from the British government because they had weapons. These same men believed it was their responsibility to fight against British tyranny. And based upon their desire to ensure the supreme power in the nation was the citizens, as stipulated in the preamble to the Constitution, the only way to guarantee the people had that power was to protect their rights to own weapons. The Third Amendment guarantees the citizens the rights to ownership and use of their property without intrusion by the government, without the consent of the owner. The Fourth Amendment provides protection against unreasonable search and seizure. This protects citizens from unreasonable search and seizures and stipulates certain limitations on what is considered unreasonable. The Fifth Amendment guarantees rights to those accused of a federal crime. Hopefully none of us will need to know the details of those rights, but they include requiring grand juries. It protects against double jeopardy, self-incrimination, the right to remain silent, and the right to due process, among other subjects. The Sixth Amendment also concerns prosecutions and adds the rights of the accused to a speedy and public trial by a jury of informed peers to those on trial. Other subjects covered is the composition of a jury. Accusations must be proved beyond reasonable doubt. Right to be informed of criminal charges, right to be confronted by adverse witnesses, and the right of counsel are also guaranteed. The Seventh Amendment focuses on civil lawsuits, and I'm not really going to cover that because it's not all that interesting to most of us. The Eighth Amendment simply says excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. The Ninth Amendment is a constitutional safety net intended to make clear that the individuals have other fundamental rights in addition to those listed in the First through Eighth Amendments. Because the rights protected by the Ninth Amendment are not specified, they are referred to as unenumerated. The Supreme Court has found that unenumerated rights include such important rights as the right to travel, the right to vote, the right to keep personal matters private, and to make important decisions about one's health care or body. The 10th Amendment, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. This amendment further defines the balance between federal and state government. The amendment says that the federal government has only those powers specifically granted by the Constitution. The 11th Amendment looks again at judicial power and was added to provide more details concerning lawsuits and state powers. Now, while the 11th is not really important to us, the 12th Amendment is a critical addition towards maintaining state rights and limiting the federal government's ability to fall under the control of the most populated states. While Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution establishes the Electoral College, the 12th Amendment modifies the way the Electoral College chooses the President and Vice President and provides other clarifications. What we should remember is that the Electoral College is designed to give each state an equal footing on choosing the executive branch leaders. This is another attempt to secure the concept of a balance of power. Each state casts the same number of votes. That is why someone could win the total popular vote but lose a presidential election. Because the number of representatives in the legislative branch are based upon the number of people in a given state, the more populated states have the potential to dominate the legislative branch. The Electoral College that controls the outcome of a presidential election is what keeps the balance of power from those states with a lot of population and those states that do not have that. The 13th Amendment was the first of three Reconstruction-era amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, that grew out of the Civil War. These amendments eliminated slavery, guaranteed due process, equal protection, and voting rights to all Americans. The 16th Amendment gives Congress the power to impose a uniform, direct income tax, and has become the basis for all subsequent federal income tax legislation, and has greatly expanded the scope of federal taxing and spending in the years since its passage. The 16th Amendment was ratified by the states in 1913. The 17th Amendment provides that senators be elected by the people directly instead of the original law presented in the second article that had led to voter fraud. The 18th Amendment was ratified on January 16, 1919. It prohibited the making, transporting, and selling of alcoholic beverages. During Prohibition, it is estimated that alcohol consumption and alcohol-related deaths declined dramatically, but Prohibition gave rise to a large and pervasive black alcohol market that encouraged disrespect for the law and strengthened organized crime. Prohibition came to an end with the ratification of Amendment 21 on December 5, 1933. The 19th Amendment gave the right to women to vote. Took them long enough. It was passed in 1920. The 20th Amendment was ratified in 1933. It is a complicated addition discussing the executive branch concerning the dates of terms to succession. The 21st Amendment, as mentioned, repealed the Alcohol Prohibition Amendment. The 22nd Amendment codified the limiting of 2 terms for a president. While all other presidents had followed Washington's lead and only ran for 2 terms, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt had been a 4-term president. After he died, the Congress made it so that you could only have the 2 terms. The 23rd Amendment, the subject is the 10 square miles the Constitution stipulates as belonging to the federal government, called the District of Columbia. It treats the District of Columbia as if it were a state for purposes of the Electoral College, thereby giving residents of the district the right to have their votes counted in presidential elections. Because the District of Columbia is an entity unto itself. Okay, so even the 23rd Amendment did not make Washington D.C. make D.C. a state. It merely grants its citizens the number of electors that it would have if it was a state. Nor does the amendment provide the district residents with representation in Congress or change the way the district is governed. So you got this little enclave in the middle of Washington, D.C., which is Washington, D.C., that are not a state. They're not a territory. They're in their own unique jurisdiction. And there's a lot to talk about with that, but we're not going to. The 24th Amendment. Although passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments helped remove many of the discriminatory laws left over from slavery, they did not eliminate all forms of discrimination. The 24th Amendment, ratified on January 23, 1964, was passed to address one particular injustice called the poll tax that is forbidden by this amendment. The cost of voting prevented numerous citizens from voting. The 25th Amendment was passed in order to clarify what happens upon the death, removal, or resignation of the president or vice president, and how the presidency is temporarily filled if the president becomes disabled and cannot fulfill his responsibilities. The 26th Amendment gives young adults between the age of 18 and 21 the right to vote. The measure is another in a line of constitutional changes that expanded the right to vote to more citizens. At the time of ratification of this Constitution in 1788, most states limited voting to white male citizens who were over the age of 21. The 27th Amendment prevents members of Congress from granting themselves pay raises during the current session. Rather, any pay raises that are adopted must take effect during the next session of Congress. Proponents of the amendment believed that the legislators were more likely to be cautious about increasing congressional pay if they have no personal stake in the vote. Now, I looked at other websites, but the website that I recommend you go to, because it's the one that I based much of this on, is the annenbergclassroom.org/Constitution. Okay, that's ANNENBERG classroom.org/Constitution. So that I hope that this just gives you a feeling for what the Constitution is and what it isn't, because there are probably huge libraries full of documents, legal documents, concerning interpretation of this, that, and everything, that is sort of the backdrop to people when they begin to talk about the Constitution. Laws and the decisions by courts, including the Supreme Court, and a lot of just accepted policy that is sort of accepted without being codified. All of those things that go into what we have to deal with in the Constitution is way beyond the average person. But what I'm trying to do here is give the average person, including myself, an understanding of what it was that the Founding Fathers were attempting to do. The document the Founding Fathers wrote provides the foundation for the United States Republic that has lasted 235 years, allowing for a stable government and a prosperous nation of free citizens. The reason military and government officials take an oath to defend and protect the Constitution is that it represents the concept that the people hold supreme power. You are the people, and the Constitution is the legal contract making you the ultimate power in the United States. Please execute that power by becoming an informed voter. Thank you for listening.